Oh, the official release of Boruto's 5th chapter is out, and boy oh boy, were the fan translations not 100% accurate. Which, you know, is kind of standard operating if we're being real, because who would have believed that a giant multi-million-dollar company with multiple professional translators would be better at translating than one dude with Google Translate? Well, at least the first person to translate is one dude with Google Translate, and then the next guy to translate is a guy who kind of speaks Japanese and also kind of speaks English. And then when you get to the good leaks, it's 2 or 3 guys that kind of either speak Japanese or English working together. But regardless, the biggest takeaway from any of this is that the official release of manga is usually the best version of manga. But since in this industry, if you're not first, you're last, you gotta read the leaks. And while usually the differences in translation are pretty minor, and the real problem with reading leaks is grammatical errors, this week in Chapter 5 of Boruto, there was a pretty big discrepancy in terms of what the fan translation was and what the official translation was. And that discrepancy may or may not have inspired an entire video, which may or may not have gone out on Thursday. But them's the games, baby! Sometimes you're reading kind of sketchy leaks that tell you that Naruto is undergoing a transformation that he's never undergone before, and sometimes you're reading official releases that show you that the real person who's evolving is actually the leader Shinju, who was talking about Naruto a sentence or 2 earlier. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, in Chapter 5 of Two Blue Vortex, the leader Shinju does not say that Naruto is undergoing a new type of evolution. And while the leader Shinju does say that they want to consume Naruto Uzumaki, they say that they want to consume Naruto Uzumaki because, and I quote, "we're already divine trees and are evolving differently than usual. Thus, it has appeared a change is happening to our instinctual drive as well." Which is so massively different from Naruto is undergoing a new kind of evolution. See, the real mix-up here is that possession is kind of unfortunately difficult to discern in the Japanese language, and thus the fan translators believe that the evolution that the leader Shinju was talking about belonged to Naruto, and not the person talking. But fortunately, a team of professional translators took on that chapter and made it very clear that the evolution that was being talked about was of the divine trees or the Shinju having the conversation in the first place. And more importantly, the reason that we got to this conversation in the first place is because all of the Shinju have decided that their primal urge to eat Kawaki and Boruto is no longer important. And now the most important thing to them is consuming the people that they want to consume. Be they Sarada, Naruto, Konohamaru, or Ada. And thus, with the official release, the motivations of the Shinju have become much more clear. They are not interested in Kawaki and Boruto, as they all believe that they are already divine trees. And therefore, when it comes down to it, they don't need to consume Kawaki or Boruto because they've already achieved a state of evolution that they were looking for. And therefore, the Shinju's motivations to eat Boruto or Kawaki is akin to somebody in their early 20s wanting to have a child. Well, biologically, your body might tell you that it's about time you have a kid and that you should have a kid. Your ego or your consciousness will tell you that there's other more important things that you should do. Things that your brain wants to do. Things that you as an individual find interesting, as opposed to giving in to the primal urges of reproducing. So while there is definitely still the possibility that the Shinju at one point or another will decide that Boruto and Kawaki are super interesting, the line that the leader Shinju told all of his other Shinju was basically that now that we've evolved into divine trees and are different from any other Claw Grime or Ten Tails clone or Ten Tails in history, our urges are different than they ever have been before. And thus it's natural for us to do things that differ us from our primal core. And in actuality, these wants are what make us individuals. And while we now fully understand the motivations of the Shinju, unfortunately this moment does make a couple things way more confusing. See, because in the fan translations, the reason that the leader Shinju wanted to consume Naruto is because he was undergoing a new form of evolution. And thus, if we believe that Naruto in the Daikokuten was getting stronger by the minute, then it would only make sense that the leader would want to consume him and absorb that power. That made sense. But now that the official translation out and Super doesn't have that line anymore, I'm incredibly stumped as to why the leader Shinju would want to consume Naruto. Because let's assume for a second that Naruto's not just floating in the Daikokuten, absorbing a massive amount of either nature energy or Ishiki's chakra, which means that Naruto is floating in the Daikokuten just as strong as the moment that he was placed in the Daikokuten. Which means this is the same old Naruto who's 1/4 as strong as he was prior to his fight against Ishiki, as he now no longer has Kurama and he's lost half of his chakra, which makes Naruto, within the confines of his own universe, probably not even top 10 in terms of strength. So why would the leader Shinju, out of all of the possible people that he could consume, want Naruto? Well, you're gonna look at me crazy when I say this, but it might just be because the leader Shinju is partially Kurama. Yes, I'm aware, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but if you give me a couple of your minutes, it's not going to sound that way forever. You see, because there's actually some pretty compelling evidence to show that Kurama is at least partially responsible for the leader Shinju's desire to consume Naruto. Even though, yes, Kurama is gone, but he may not be that way for long. It sounds crazy, I'm fully aware, but crazy is what we do best on this page. So sit back and relax as we talk Kurama's return revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me revealing things, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weep Commander, where I do stay fully clothed, but I also talk about all other anime that aren't Naruto or Boruto. And if you guys just want to hear me talk about anime, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you just want to look like somebody who does talk about anime, guys, go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. So, did we make a 25-minute video talking about Naruto's possible power-up based off an incorrect fan translation? Maybe. Did that video do 100,000 views in 12 hours? Also maybe. But I'm not perfect, and neither are the translations that I'm always reading, apparently. I just go with the information that I have, and unfortunately in this business, like I've already said, if you're not first, you are last. And I gotta beat all these other anime pages to the Boruto news. Now, does this discrepancy between the official translation and the fan translation make me believe that Naruto's not gonna come out of the Daikoku-ten stronger? No. I still believe that there's a fair amount of evidence to prove that Naruto will come back into the story stronger than he ever was before. However, unfortunately, when it comes down to it, there's now just really no proof to show that. Sure, while we can sit here and theorize that while Naruto's body may not be able to move in the Daikoku-ten, his brain could still be active, and therefore there's a possibility that while standing in this incredibly still phase, he could still pull in nature chakra. There's still technically the possibility that Naruto's Hashirama arm is passively pulling in the nature energy that exists in the Daikoku-ten, and there's still the possibility that Naruto, now as an empty vessel, is filling up with the power of Ishiki, or just nature energy in the Daikoku-ten. Really, when it comes down to it, this fan translation not being correct doesn't necessarily mean that the theories that we made about Naruto are incorrect, especially when you consider the fact that the leader Shinju is interested in Naruto. And if Naruto was 1/4 of his previous self and barely in the top 10 in terms of strength out of everybody in the entire universe, it would be weird that the most important person in this arc is interested in Naruto, as opposed to somebody like Boruto or Kawaki, who are way stronger than Naruto nowadays. And thus, simply because the leader Shinju is interested in Naruto, we have plenty of reason to speculate that Naruto is going to return and stronger. But as it currently stands, we now technically have nothing outside of the fact that the leader Shinju wants to consume Naruto to substantiate that claim. But the leader Shinju wanted to consume Naruto may be enough evidence, because now that Naruto isn't confirmed to be going under a new form of evolution, it makes the idea that the leader Shinju wants to consume Naruto all the more perplexing. See, because every other Shinju wants to consume the person that was most important to the person that they bit to turn into a Shinju. Bug wants to consume Ada, Moegi wants to consume Konohamaru, and Sasuke wants to consume Sarada. Now, since we're assuming the leader is Jigen, because that feels fairly obvious, the way that we had justified Jigen wanting to consume Naruto previously is that Jigen understood that Naruto is essentially a giant power cell right now. And while Naruto, even at 1/4 of his original power, is still power cell adjacent, Kawaki, Code, Boruto, Ada, and Daemon are all probably stronger than Naruto now.
Oh, Nick, Ada's a non-combatant. How can you say she's stronger than Naruto?
One, Naruto couldn't beat her in a fight, and two, she has omnipotence. And I'm assuming anybody who consumes her gets omnipotence. Big Mom rules, baby. Thus, it would make a lot more sense that if Naruto wasn't getting stronger, that this Jigen Shinju decide to consume one of these other 5. And yet now with Naruto in the bottom barrel of power, there's really no reason to consume him, especially when we consider the fact that one of the theories we had is that Naruto was filling with Ishiki's energy in the Daikoku-ten because it was a realm created by Ishiki. And thus there's a possibility that if this Jigen/Ishiki Shinju were to eat Naruto, who's filled with Ishiki's energy, Ishiki would be able to be reborn. But now that that's seemingly off the table, we have to find another way to draw a connection between the leader Shinju and Naruto. Because if the leader Shinju is a manifestation of Jigen or Ishiki, why would they want to eat Naruto? Because if we're going with the ideology that the Shinju want to consume the person that's most important to the person that they bit to become a Shinju, whether this manifestation is the manifestation of Jigen, Ishiki, or both, in none of those circumstances should that person have been Naruto. If anything, they should want to consume Kawaki. Not only just because Kawaki was closer to Jigen than Naruto was and spent more time with Jigen than Naruto did, but also because Kawaki has a karma marking from Ishiki. And while one could obviously make the argument that if the leader Shinju were to eat Kawaki, they would immediately turn into a divine tree, the leader Shinju said themselves that they're already divine trees and that they're undergoing evolution differently than any other 10-tails/divine tree in history. And thus, even if the possibility is slim, there's a possibility that if one of the Shinju were to eat Boruto or Kawaki, they wouldn't turn into a divine tree because They're already one. And instead, what would be gained here, hypothetically, if the leader Shinju ate Kawaki, is that all of Ishiki's abilities and powers, which are in Kawaki's karma marking, would be reunited with a semblance of Jigen/Ishiki's soul. Now, usually that's all supposed to be included on a karma marking. However, this karma marking was made by Amado to specifically leave Ishiki's soul out of the equation. However, since there's a better than not possibility that this leader Shinju is a manifestation of at least Jigen, we could reconnect the soul with the powers and abilities. And thus, if the leader Shinju was to consume Kawaki, they would effectively rebirth at least Jigen, with Kawaki's body serving as a medium for that resurrection. Kind of like it was always supposed to. Consuming Naruto confers none of those benefits, as pretty much all that the leader Shinju would achieve by consuming Naruto is a boost in chakra proportionate to how much chakra Naruto has nowadays, which probably pales in comparison to the level of power that the leader Shinju would be able to acquire if they ate Kawaki. And thus, if we are assuming that Naruto is not getting massively stronger than Daikokuten, then the only possible motivation that the leader Shinju would have for choosing Naruto over Kawaki would be emotion. Something emotionally has to be pulling the leader Shinju to Naruto, much in the same way that Sasuke is pulled to Sarada and Moegi is pulled to Konohamaru. And when it really comes down to it, I can only think of two ways to explain how this emotional tie is made. One of the ways is fun, and the other is a little bit less fun. And neither of these options is perfect, which makes me want to go with the fun one more than the less fun one. Let's catch you up on what the less fun one is first. The less fun option is that the reason that all of the respective targets were chosen by their respective Shinju is because it was the last person that the person who was bit to become the Shinju was thinking about. Now, on a surface level, this seems to make a lot of sense. It seems like an incredibly easy explanation for why these targets were chosen. As humans, every single human that was bitten by a claw grime turned into a tree while thinking about somebody else. And since that was that person's most recent memory, obviously the Shinju, a manifestation of that person's will, personality, and abilities, is gonna have that one fleeting memory, the most recent memory that person had before they turned into a Shinju. And thus, since that is the only person that the Shinju can remember, naturally, that's gonna be their target. And within the confines of the plot and narrative of Boruto, this kind of makes sense, as the Shinju themselves are grasping at straws to try and figure out what consciousness looks like, while also trying to remember what their past life was. Now, the consensus that they come to in terms of consciousness is that they need to listen to their primal urges at least a little bit. Well, they don't necessarily need to consume Kawaki or Boruto, they do want to consume people. But if we're not going to consume Kawaki and Boruto, then who are we going to consume? Well, the first person that comes to your mind is an appropriate choice as any, and thus, we have our targets. However, unfortunately, while this theory makes sense on a base level, it falls apart when you look at it a little more deeply. See, this theory kind of stems from two different Shinju. The first would be Sasuke. Now, when it comes down to it, the reason that Sasuke could have chosen Sarada as a target is one, because she's the most important thing on Earth to him, and two, probably because she was the last thing that he was thinking about. Because as Sasuke was battling against Code and his army of claw grimes, he told Boruto to retreat, as Sasuke was fully aware that they weren't strong enough to battle Code as he currently was, or more like as they currently were. And since Sasuke understood that Boruto was going to be involved in a very important battle down the line, and that his daughter Sarada was also going to be involved in that battle, he believed that if Boruto were to go down to this battle against Code, his daughter would probably die in this important battle. And thus, one of the last things that Sasuke says to Boruto is keep an eye on Sarada. And pretty much the entire theme of chapter 5 is that everything that Sasuke did in that 1 year that him and Boruto spent together was for Sarada, as the only reason that Sasuke helped Boruto in the first place is so he could help Sarada in this battle against some big baddie down the line. And Boruto even goes so far as to convey this message to Sarada when he returns home at the end of the chapter. So it seems pretty clear that Sarada was almost constantly on Sasuke's brain. And thus it's relatively safe to assume that the last thing that Sasuke thought about as a tree was slowly climbing up his body was Sarada. However, unfortunately, this theory kind of falls apart when you consider any other Shinju outside of Sasuke. See, the only other real Shinju that you could kind of apply this line of logic to is the leader, who I'm just going to start referring to as the Jigen Shinju. See, it's not necessarily crazy to think about that the last person that Ishiki thought about was Naruto, as Naruto had just given him the beating of a lifetime in Baryon mode and was heavily responsible in the fact that he didn't get the transfer into Kawaki. Naruto is not the last person that Ishiki interfaces with. In fact, the last person that Ishiki interfaces with is technically Code, as after Ishiki dies, he sends his consciousness to Code to be like, hey Code, you gotta turn into a full Otsutsuki for me, okay? But if you don't want to use his Force Ghost feats, the real last person that Ishiki ever interfaced with was Kawaki, who tricked Ishiki into thinking in his final moments that he would finally get to place his karma marking back on Kawaki. However, instead of getting to place his karma marking on Kawaki, it turned out that the Kawaki he was holding on to was a shadow clone, and thus Ishiki wasn't able to place a karma marking on him, which led to Ishiki's inevitable death. And thus there are two people that are inarguably more important to Ishiki that he talks to or battles against after his battle with Naruto. So I find it really hard to believe that the last person on Ishiki's brain would have been Naruto. You could say the same about the Moegi Shinju. By the way, I'm aware they all have names. I haven't learned them yet. See, while it is a technical possibility that the last person that Moegi thought about as he turned into a tree was Konohamaru, it would make a lot more sense to me that the last people that Moegi would think about would either be the people she was protecting or the team that she was protecting people with, Team 10. And while the Moegi Shinju does bring up the anger and vitriol that she feels from Team 10 and Konohamaru, she selects Konohamaru as her target. Now, it's not crazy to think, as she slowly turned into a tree, that Konohamaru flashed across her brain, but it just seems entirely more likely that it would be one of the members of her team that she was actively protecting. And while Konohamaru is a childhood friend and possibly a future love interest, it's just a weird time to think about him. And you could say the same for the Bug Shinju. See, because, well, obviously, Bug didn't have a whole lot of love in his life, with Ada being the rare exception. Ada had been gone from the car dimension for quite literally months by the time that Bug was bitten by a claw cry. And by far and away, the more likely person who would have flashed across Bug's brain as he was turning into a tree would be Code, the person responsible for him turning into a tree. And thus, while this theory does hold up with Sasuke, it doesn't really hold up with any of the other Shinju. So really, when it comes down to it, the only connection that we have between the Shinju and their targets is importance, and that importance seems to be tied into love, or at least like. So instead, let's talk about the fun theory. The fun theory that explains how Jigen could possibly like and or love Naruto. And to answer that question, we have to do a short list of people that have ever liked and or loved Naruto. And I'm not just talking like a casual like. I mean, Naruto has to be the most important person on Earth to them. And that list isn't as long as you might think. That list is probably Naruto's family, that is Hinata, Boruto, Himawari, Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Kawaki, and Kurama. Oh, and maybe Sasuke, but Sasuke is clearly a bigger fan of Sarada than he is of Naruto. Now, we know that the Jigen Shinju can't be a lot of the people on this list. Can't be Himawari, she's still running around. Can't be Hinata, she's in the Daikoku 10. Can't be Kawaki, he's still running around. Can't be Boruto, he's still running around. Jiraiya, Minato, and Kushina are all on the ground. And Sasuke's already a different Shinju, which kind of only leaves one question mark. And that question mark is Kurama. See, I know what a lot of you are saying. Kurama is in the ground as Minato, Kushina, or Jiraiya. And to a certain degree, you're right. However, Kurama's a much more mysterious being than those other three humans. See, because Kurama is dead. Supposedly. That is to say that all of his chakra is gone from Earth, even though technically all of his chakra isn't gone from Earth. Kinkaku and Genkaku still exist. But Kinkaku and Genkaku are not going to be brought into the equation here. I'm actually not even going to talk about them at all. We're just going to assume they're forgotten from the story because they're forgotten from the story. Kishimoto is never going to use them again. How on earth would any of Kurama's chakra end up in the Jigen Shinju? Especially since, after all, it's all gone. Well, as we all know, Kurama was pretty instrumental in Ishiki's death, as Naruto and Kurama were able to unlock Baryon mode by clashing their chakras into each other and creating a new form of energy. However, in order to create this new form of energy, the chakra of both Naruto and Kurama had to be destroyed. But destroying chakra is not only not easy, but also kind of weird. Kind of weird in the fact that when you destroy chakra, since all chakra is connected, anybody whose chakra you come into contact with is also destroyed. And this is why whenever Naruto made contact with Ishiki, he was able to shave minutes, if not hours, off of his lifespan, as Naruto was fundamentally destroying Ishiki's remaining chakra. And thus, in a sense, every single time Naruto made contact with Ishiki while in Baryon mode, Ishiki's chakra became a third source of chakra. Because, think about it, all chakra is connected. And if Ishiki's chakra is also being destroyed every single time that Baryon mode Naruto comes into contact with him, it's safe to assume that Ishiki's chakra is also playing into the equation of Baryon mode. And thus, in a sense, in this battle between Baryon mode Naruto and Ishiki, Naruto, Kurama, and Ishiki's chakra all joined each other in their respective destruction. And thus, it's a possibility that the merging of all three of these sources of chakra made it so that these souls would be permanently intertwined. That is to say that as Kurama and Ishiki's souls possibly ascended to the Pure Lands together, they ascended there fused. Now, this wouldn't be the craziest thing that we'd ever seen, as there's kind of a trend of people dying alongside Kurama and fusing with them in some kind of afterlife. As when Minato uses Reaper Death Seal and a Trigram Seal to split Kurama in half and place half in Naruto and half in himself, the 16 or so years he spends with Kurama in the belly of the Shinigami turns him into a perfect Jinchuriki. And thus, what if the collision of chakras between Ishiki and Kurama and them dying simultaneously allowed for them to undergo a transformation akin to Minato and Kurama? And thus, if Ishiki's soul is brought back through the medium of his chakra imprinted on the juvenile Ten Tails, Kurama would come along with that soul. And that would explain why Jigen, of all people, would want to consume Naruto when every other Shinju wants to consume the person they love most. But this isn't the only possible explanation. We know very little about the Ten Tails. And in fact, pretty much all we know about the Ten Tails is that they're an amalgamation of nature energy with no consciousness. And thus, they're brought from planet to planet by the Otsutsuki to terraform it, destroy it, and then inevitably turn into a divine trait. Now, outside of the fact that they're an amalgamation of nature energy and massively powerful, really the only other thing we know about the Ten Tails is that if you have creation of all things, you can split the Ten Tails into nine-tailed beasts, as Hagoromo was able to do this with the Ten Tails that Ishiki and Kaguya brought to Earth. One of the Ten Tails they brought to Earth. But we still don't necessarily have an answer for where that second juvenile Ten Tails came from, as when it really boils down to it, there was no reason for either Kaguya or Ishiki to bring two Ten Tails. And since this Ten Tails is multiple times identified as a juvenile Ten Tails, it's safe to assume that either this Ten Tails was brought to Earth while still young, and Ten Tails lived for a very long time, which isn't crazy when considered the fact that the Otsutsuki are immortal, or that this Ten Tails was born on Earth. See, once again, we know very little about the Ten Tails. We're actually not even entirely sure how they're made. But it is a possibility that this juvenile Ten Tails, which is clearly younger than the Ten Tails that was sealed away in Hagoromo, could possibly be a product of that very same Ten Tails, which would explain how we ended up with two Ten Tails. And it is a possibility, if that juvenile Ten Tails is a product of the original Ten Tails, that they could be somewhat linked, which, considering they serve the exact same purpose of each other, isn't that crazy. And therefore, it's a possibility that after Code sliced off thousands of slices from this juvenile Ten Tails, leaving it emaciated and much weaker, it's possible that this weakened and emaciated Ten Tails was closer to that of a regular tailed beast than an actual Ten Tails. And since we are operating under the assumption that the Jigen Shinju was created from this juvenile emaciated Ten Tails, as the juvenile emaciated Ten Tails disappears one moment and the Jigen Shinju appears the next, and Jigen, who's super dead, didn't get bitten by a claw grime, that it's a possibility that somehow, through some kind of harmic resonance, the love that all of the other tailed beasts, and especially Kurama, had for Naruto somehow transferred to that of the new emaciated juvenile Ten Tails. As well, the Ten Tails itself has no ability to feel emotion. The same thing was also said about claw grimes. However, because whatever modifications that were made to the claw grimes were also made to the Ten Tails, there's a fair amount of possibility that the emaciated Ten Tails that we saw is different from any other Ten Tails we've ever seen. And therefore, it's a possibility that this Ten Tails is able to tap into the emotions that the other tailed beasts have for Naruto, which would lead to a residual longing for Naruto over anybody else. And thus Naruto would end up as the Jigen Shinju's target. But I don't really know. Without the idea that Naruto is getting infinitely more powerful than Daikokuten and is therefore an incredible target for somebody trying to get more powerful to consume, it's rather difficult for me to draw a line between Jigen and Naruto when it comes to the subject of love. So why do you guys think the Jigen Shinju is so interested in Naruto? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. It seems as though it's about time that I re-pick up my Japanese lessons and start doing the translations myself.